Hey, True Crime XS listeners. This is Jamie, and I'm one of the executive producers of the podcast True Crime XS.
And this is Nick. I'm part of the support crew at True Crime XS.
In light of an upcoming episode of the television crime series 48 Hours, we've decided that we would release a short bonus episode
About some very important parts of the story of True Crime XS.
This is about the very end of the killer's life, when several drawings and writings written in his own blood were discovered before and after his suicide in 2012.
Here's John and Meg to explain why this is important. Enjoy this.
It is a very special bonus episode of True Crime XS.
We'll let John and Meg take it away.
This podcast may contain disturbing content for some listeners. It's intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. This is True Crime XS.
Symbols are a language that can help us understand our past.
Professor Langdon, the chief of police would like your assistance.
I'm not sure how much help I'm going to be here this evening. Dear God.
A murder that hides a message.
He did this himself in his own blood?
Is it possible?
A code
This is a message your grandfather left you.
He left us.
only he can break.
Professor Harry.
Demons, omens, codes, monks. Da Vinci.
Professor Langdon, you're in grave danger.
Sir Lee Teabing.
Robert, a dramatic late-night arrival. What can an old cripple do for you?
I'm into something here that I cannot understand.
We are in the middle of a war, one that's been going on forever. Protect a secret so powerful that if revealed, it would devastate the very foundations of mankind.
What are you talking about?
You asked what would be worth killing for. Witness the biggest cover-up in human history.
You're not gonna make it!
You're seeing all this is real?
Real enough to kill for.
Once I started, and there was nothing else like it.
What are you holding in your hands now?
These are items that were seized out of Israel Key's jail cell.
Has the public ever been shown this before?
No. These skulls are drawn in blood.
The blood, where do you believe the blood came from?
I think it was Israel's blood.
Israel Keys is a serial killer who hid his crimes for many years. He was meticulous, he was incredibly bright, and he was incredibly lethal.
And the significance of 11 skulls, what is that?
We believe that 11 is the total number of victims. I don't think anybody in his family, his friends, his relationships, his spouses had any idea what he was doing.
It gives me the chills to think I had talked to him, had known him.
That's where I got my kicks, I guess, was being able to live two different lives and have no one have a clue.
Unless you heard him talk about the murders, you would not know that he was a serial killer.
With Keys, it wasn't about a particular victim. It was about a location.
Why did you pick these folks? I didn't. It was just random.
Samantha Koenig is an 18-year-old girl who was raised and lived in Alaska. She went to high school here. She worked at the coffee stand.
She was a young girl working her job. I'm terrified of what she went through.
So at this point, Samantha is she's making coffee.
She has no idea her entire life is about to change in a horrible way.
No.
People never expect stuff to happen to them.
He would wait until he had the victims under control, and then that's when I think the real monster came out.
There's always a specific way I wanted things done, very specific way I wanted things to happen, and I have the whole thing planned out. I have everything I need to do it.
He loved to travel.
Every time I drive, I'd be looking for places, good places to do stuff.
You'll see locations in Seattle, Gresham, Oregon, Port Angeles, Washington.
He would rent cars, he would drive thousands of miles, he would take people from one state and he would bury them in other states.
San Diego, Tijuana, Salt Lake City, Utah, Cleveland, Ohio, Edmond, Washington, Fort Wayne, Indiana. There are potential victims wherever Israel Keyes traveled.
Do you believe that this weapon somewhere in the United States may have been used to kill someone?
It's possible.
I had big plans for that gun.
We know that there are families out there whose loved ones died at the hands of Israel Keyes. Right now, we're just trying to find them.
Welcome to a special bonus episode of True Crime XS. Apparently the FBI has decided they're going to go on 48 hours and talk about something from the end of the killer's life when the killer committed suicide. And I'm going to give you a couple descriptions of what that is. From the book The Devil in the Darkness by J.T. Hunter, Department of Corrections personnel confiscated 2 letters from his cell. He had written one of the letters to his brothers, admitting that he was a serial killer, but letting them know that he was not sorry for what he had done. In the other letter, a rambling 10-page stream of consciousness document, written in all capital letters, with no punctuation or paragraph structure, he described 6 murders that he had committed, as well as the accompanying sexual assaults. The letter included reference to the Couriers and Samantha Koenig murders. Along with the letters, prison officials made a disturbing discovery. He'd been drawing pictures on his cell wall using his own blood. The pictures included 11 skulls, under one of which he wrote, "We are one." From the book American Predator by Maureen Callahan, Chapter 34. What he ultimately planned, or what larger plan he may have gotten away with, we may never know. Sometime after 10 o'clock on the night of December 1st, 2012, he committed suicide in his prison cell with a razor blade and a noose. He left 12 skulls on the wall, drawn with his own blood, the words "We are one" written underneath. He also left the team one final clue, also scrawled in blood, Belize. Bell and Payne maintain that Keyes murdered 11 people and that the 12th skull was likely his. They believed him when he said his final number was less than a dozen. To Payne, ever the math guy, a dozen was always a weird number. Most people count by 5s or 10s. Less than a dozen to him meant 11. Other agents who worked this case, Ganaway and Chacon among them, believe he killed far more people than that. For the record, it didn't say Belize. It said Corozal. And Corozal is a town in Belize that's about 84 miles north of Belize City. And among other things, that area is a haven for fugitives from the United States. So what you heard at the beginning was a trailer for the movie The Da Vinci Code, and then a trailer for the new 48 Hours episode on this killer. And I'm not hijacking what they're doing there. I hope that the FBI has a new story, but I also hope that they use a particular word. Because while others described it as 12 skulls, Meg did not. When I was finally able to obtain a picture of the 12 skulls, Meg called it 11 skulls and something else over the words "We are one." From an online description of Aleister Crowley, the Baphomet of Levi was to become an important figure within the cosmology of Thelema, the mystical system established by Aleister Crowley in the early 20th century. Baphomet features in the creed of the Gnostic Catholic Church, recited by the congregation in the Gnostic Mass, in the sentence, "And I believe in the serpent and the lion, mystery of mysteries, in his name, Baphomet." In Magic Book 4, Crowley asserted that Baphomet was a divine androgyne and the hieroglyph of arcane perfection, seen as that which reflects. What occurs above so reflects below, or as above, so below. The devil does not exist. It is a false name invented by the Black Brothers to imply a unity in their ignorant muddle of dispersions. A devil who had unity would be a god. The devil is, historically, the god of any people that one personally dislikes. This serpent, Satan, is not the enemy of man, but he who made gods of our race, knowing good and evil. He bade know thyself, and taught initiation. He is the devil of the book of thought, and his emblem is Baphomet, the androgyne, who is the hieroglyph of arcane perfection. He is therefore life and love. But moreover, his letter is Ayin, the eye, so that he is light, and his zodiacal image is Capricornus, that leaping goat whose attribute is liberty. For Crowley, Baphomet is further a representation of the spiritual nature of the spermatozoa, while also being symbolic of the magical child produced as a result of sex magic. As such, Baphomet represents the union of opposites, especially as mystically personified in chaos and Babylon, combined and biologically manifested with the sperm and the egg united in the zygote. Crowley proposed that Baphomet was derived from Father Mithras. In his Confessions, he described the circumstances that led to this etymology. I had taken the name Baphomet as my motto in the OTO. For 6 years and more, I had tried to discover the proper way to spell his name. I knew that it must have 8 letters, and also that the numerical and literal correspondences must be such as to express the meaning of the name in such a way as to confirm what scholarship had found out about it, and also to clear up these problems which archaeologists had so far failed to solve. One theory of the name is that it represents the words for the baptism of wisdom. Another, that it is a corruption of a title meaning Father Mithras. Needless to say, the suffix R supported the latter theory. I added up the word as spelt by the wizard. It spelled 729. This number had never appeared in my Kabbalistic working, and therefore meant nothing to me. It, however, justified itself as being the cube of 9. The mystic title given by Christ to Peter as the cornerstone of the church has the same value. So far, the wizard has shown great qualities. He had cleared up the etymological problem and shown why the Templars should have given the name Baphomet to their so-called idol. Baphomet was Father Mithras, the cubical stone, which was the corner of the temple.
It's just a taunt. It's like a final taunt. Like, you're never going to know, and this was a joke.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And like it kind of actually made my skin crawl a little bit, because I've never heard anybody mention the Baphomet ever. And I've never, and I guess most people wouldn't even really know what that is. And it's
how did you know what it is?
Well, I don't know if you're aware of this, but my husband was in a band, and it is something to do with hell.
Can you say that in a more anonymous fashion?
No, because it's, I mean, what do you want me to say?
Well, I'm just saying my husband was in a band, and their name linked to the. If you want to say it, you want to say it, but I feel like that's an identifying factor, and I didn't know if you wanted
It is an identifying factor, but you asked me how I know about it, and I don't really want to be identified. Okay, but so my husband plays. Well, any way I say it, it's going to be an identifying factor. Whatever, though. The name of the band came from. See, I don't know how to do it without being identifying. But the reason I know about it is because of like interest in that stuff when we were a lot younger.
Okay, so what you're saying is your husband had an interest in music that used this symbology, and that symbology, you were familiar. You saw it, and you went, oh, that's this.
Well, yeah, sort of. I mean, I've always like, I don't know. I don't want to come off like I don't want to come off any way at all, except to say I've always been interested in symbolic type things. I've always found it fascinating how hung up on like the pentagram and different things, or the cross. Like, I've always found it fascinating how people can get so hung up on those types of things. And so at some point in time in my life, I took an interest, and I I notice things, because to me, it's just a drawing on a piece of paper. Like, you can put whatever meaning you want behind it. And I always thought it was so interesting that people gave these types of things so much power. And I don't know why I remember this particular one, but I've seen it at some point in life, and I stored it with all the other useless information in my head. And so, so I'm not a Satanist, and I don't, you can believe whatever you want to, anybody can, but it's interesting to me that this piece of symbolism came up at this particular point, because it is relevant, and it's horrifying to kind of, because, we've debated this all along, and I've said I have no idea how many people he's killed. I guess we'll know if we come to a conclusion on it. And I actually want it to be like the least amount possible. This sums up the fact that that's probably not the case. I guess it could be that he was lying because it really was only 3. But I don't think so. I don't think it's going to go that way.
But if he's lying and saying it's only 3, then we've got that body in New York that everybody talks about. There's
but is it really, though? Because the body in New York has driven me about crazy.
Right. And I totally understand.
But here's the thing, though. Okay, so I did just say that, but let me back up a second, because 3 is less than a dozen. So in theory, because he did say less than a dozen, and he left 11 skulls with this bassinet in as part of them, I would.
The joke could be that he's a serial killer that's done more. You're saying the metaphor could be I didn't kill anybody but these 3?
No, it can't be that, because he didn't say I killed 11 people. He said I killed less than a dozen. And so the 3 confessions that he has, and then the reference, let's say 4, because he does reference a body in New York, he says there are remains in New York. Okay. So that could be multiple, who knows? But so let's say, but that wouldn't be a joke. That would be actually what he stated, because he's told them it's less than a dozen.
Yeah,
are you following me?
Yeah. But the metaphor could be that, like, him saying all these things I've done is the metaphor, when he really has only done the 3. I'm just saying, like, if we were to look at it, No,
because that would still fall. I think it has to go the other way, because how would that be a joke?
Well, that they're going to try for years to think, like, how many people this guy killed, and the answer is less than a dozen, 3, but they're not going to get it.
Well, that would be absolutely wonderful, honestly.
I'm just saying,
because that's not how I interpret it when I saw it. Because, even though it is just a symbol in blood on paper, it's actually, he did it. Like, that is actually the most detailed drawing, if you look.
I know.
And it's eye-catching and it's interesting, but it is just a drawing. It does happen to be in a serial killer's blood in this instance. However, it has no power behind it. Like, it's just a symbol, but it has a tendency to bring about, like, a dark feeling. So, obviously when you're thinking about serial killers, the less people they've killed, the better. And so because it's a negative, dark symbol, it immediately took me to a place where 11 was a joke.
Yeah, and, the FBI is now, they arrived at this number 11 based on a number of factors. But so really quickly, I just want to, point this out, because this 11 thing, or less than a dozen thing, has bothered me for a long time, and they've always said 11. We think he had 11 victims. So for me, okay, I have my opinion, and then there's the FBI opinion. The way they break that down is, he says he killed someone shortly after the Mopen incident, and that it went the way he wanted. That's 1 victim. Okay. Then he wrote about 4 victims. Those are the 4 victims he wrote about in the DOC writings we can't get our hands on. So that takes us to 5, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So 5, that's less than a dozen. But then we have to add Bill and Lorraine Currier, that's 7, and Samantha Koenig is 8. Well, the FBI also says that they believe that Deborah Feldman is a victim, so that's 9. Who the fuck are the other 2?
I think that just comes into play from the. Hold on a second. Let me think.
Is it the boat victims? Because I thought they were part of the writings. Because remember, there's 2 boat victims, and then there's the pairs.
Right. Well, that would be 6.
So that's right. So that number doesn't make sense. That's more than a dozen. Do you see what I mean?
No, hold on. Okay, 6. And then you've got the Couriers. That's 8. And then Samantha Koenig. That's 9. And you said there was a killing after the Mopin incident. That's 10. What am I forgetting?
It's not us.
Okay.
We're not forgetting.
Well,
Deborah Feldman. Deborah Feldman.
Oh, okay, yeah. That would be 11. I think that's what they're thinking.
So I have racked my brain over the idea of less than a dozen, 11, all these things, and I knew about the skulls. I did not know about the Baphomet. And what I had always wondered is the skulls represented. And I'm just going to say this on here. It's not necessarily like where I stay, but it is something I come back to now and again. So now you've seen the skulls. I did not know I did not know that symbol was in there.
No, I didn't either. Well, but if you count, it's 11 skulls and then 1 Baphomet.
Okay, so explain to me now. Okay, I know nothing about Baphomet, just so you're aware. But what I do know about is I know where I've seen it before, that symbol. So that's the Knights of Templar and the Inquisitions. I know all about that. I don't know anything about the symbol. And you just were saying a bunch of stuff that I thought, while you've got it fresh in your mind, if you don't mind, explaining it to me, and then I'm going to record it just because I want to have it.
Sure. Well, that's a Baphomet. And during the Inquisition, the Knights of Templar were tortured into confessing that they had worshipped something to that effect. I don't know if it was a statue or like the concept. I don't know. But, it was a time when a lot of really terrible things were happening to Christians and Catholic Christians. And so it's basically just representing a pagan God that would be in place of, the actual God if you're a Christian.
From History.com on March 5th, 2019, why the Knights Templar gave false confessions of depravity. The Knights Templar were revered throughout medieval Europe as the fiercest, wealthiest, and most powerful military order of the era. So how were they obliterated with such devastating swiftness? Lies, spies, and torture. Lots of torture. Masterminded by a power-hungry, money-mad king. Philip IV of France began his campaign to quash the Templars on September 14th, 1307, when he sent sealed orders to his officers across the kingdom with instructions that they not be opened until the night of October the 12th. The king had good reason for secrecy. His plan? To arrest every Templar in France would have been unthinkable, even a few years earlier. The Templars, a Roman Catholic military order that answered only to the Pope, had for more than a century enjoyed a reputation as heroic fighters who distinguished themselves in the Crusades. Pope Boniface VIII had praised them as fearless warriors of Christ just a decade before Philip's move against them. But he was no longer in the picture, having died in 1303, barely a month after Philip's agents had terrorized him and held him hostage. The new pope was Clement V, a former French bishop
far more acquiescent to Philip. The Templars were now fair game, and their arrest, carried out on the morning of Friday, October the 13th, launched one of the bloodiest and most brutal episodes in church history. They wouldn't be the first group Philip had targeted, largely to fill royal coffers. In 1292, he had arrested the Lombards, wealthy Italian merchants, seized their property, and forced them to buy French nationality from him if they wished to stay. In 1306, he ordered the arrest of some 100,000 French Jews, along with the confiscation of their property. They were told to leave the kingdom within a month on pain of death, writes Dan Jones in his 2017 book, The Templars. Needing yet another source of plunder, he turned his attention to the Templars, some 5,000 of whom lived in France. Even though individual Templars had taken a vow of poverty, the order had become enormously wealthy over the decades, accumulating fleets of ships and vast property holdings throughout Europe. While they were often referred to as the Knights Templar, only a minority of the group's members were actually knights. Others were priests and serving brethren who came to hold a wide range of jobs. By 1300, many were essentially bankers. In London, for example, the group operated a system of national and international credit and finance, notes British historian Stephen Howarth in his book, The Knights Templar. Kings, merchants, and noblemen deposited gold, silver, and jewels with them for safekeeping, and came to them for loans or to make payments to people overseas. They even seem to have invented a medieval version of the traveler's check. Still, the Templars' reputation as warriors persisted. So when Pope Clement called the order's Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, to France in late 1306, supposedly to discuss launching another crusade to the Holy Land, the request didn't seem all that unusual. De Molay arrived in France in early 1307 with an entourage of 60 knights and spent the next several months in meetings there. During this time, the secret agents of the French king immediately circulated various dark rumors and odious reports concerning the Templars, wrote Charles G. Addison in an 1842 history of the group. Philip's spies also attempted to infiltrate the Templars and compiled a dossier of scurrilous charges against them for disaffected former members and others with battle axes to grind. This was all the excuse Philip needed to send out his arrest orders in September of 1307. Not only were the Templars to be arrested and their property seized, but they were to be imprisoned, interrogated, and if necessary, tortured. The instructions added, you are to promise them pardon and favor if they confess the truth, but if not, you are to acquaint them that they will be condemned to death. The purpose of torture was not to obtain the actual truth, writes French historian Alain de Merger in his 2019 book, The Persecution of the Knights Templar, but to elicit the specific truth that the accusers wanted to hear. It was that truth or death. Among the charges the Templars were expected to confess to, renouncing Christ and spitting on the cross. In Paris, the king's inquisitors tortured 138 Templars, most of whom eventually made confessions. Many were subjected to fire torture, which Addison describes in vivid detail. Their legs were fastened to an iron frame, and the soles of their feet were greased over with fat or butter. They were then placed before the fire, and a screen was drawn backwards and forwards so as to moderate and regulate the heat. Such was the agony produced by this roasting operation that the victim often went raving mad. Jones details some of the other techniques used to coerce confessions from the Templars, including starvation, sleep deprivation, relentless questioning, and the strappato, a device that yanked the victim's tethered arms behind him until he was raised from the ground and his shoulders were dislocated. Unable to withstand these tortures, many Templars did eventually confess, even Grand Master de Molay, who admitted renouncing Christ and spitting near a cross, although not directly on it. He urged other Templars to confess as well. In 1309, the Pope began his own inquiry, which would continue intermittently into 1311. Rather than assessing the guilt or innocence of individual Templars, its primary goal was to determine whether the Pope should abolish the entire order. By now, the accusations against the Templars and their order had grown to a total of 127. On this list, worshipping cats, condoning theft, perjury to enrich the order, and kissing each other's navels during secret initiation ceremonies. The Pope established a commission of bishops and other high-ranking churchmen to hear the evidence, both pro and con. Believing they were no longer at the king's mercy and would be protected by the Pope, many Templars took the opportunity to describe the tortures they suffered and to recant their earlier confessions. For some, this proved to be a fatal miscalculation. In May 1310, the Archbishop of Sens, whose brother happened to be among the king's closest associates, ordered that 54 Templars who had recanted be burned at the stake as relapsed heretics. Soon after, another 14 Templars met the same fiery fate. One dead Templar was even pulled from his grave so his bones could be burned. By now, it was clear to the surviving Templars that they could either confess or die. Most of them confessed. In March of 1312, the Pope finally announced his decision. Based on the confessions and other evidence, he said he was abolishing the Order of the Templars by an inviolable and perpetual decree. That wasn't the end of it, however. There remained some loose ends, one of them being the elderly Grand Master Desmoulins, still imprisoned in Paris. In March 1314, he and 3 other Templar leaders were put on public display outside the Cathedral of Notre Dame, where 3 cardinals, appointed by the Pope, were to pronounce their sentence. The event did not go as planned. When Desmoulins and another prisoner learned they faced life in prison, they lashed out at the cardinals. They denounced the injustice of the whole process and proclaimed their innocence. Centuries later, an enterprising Italian scholar would discover one reason Desmoulins may have been surprised by the cardinal's ruling. Digging through the Vatican's secret archives in 2001, Dr. Barbara Frail found a misfiled copy of an August 1308 document known as the Chinon Parchment. It chronicled the interrogation of Desmoulins and several other high-ranking Templars, conducted by representatives of the Pope in France, who pressed them on such issues as renouncing the cross, sodomy, and kissing on the mouth. The long-lost document revealed that after Desmoulins testified and pleaded for mercy for his sins, he had been granted absolution, or forgiveness, by the Church. The Vatican made the parchment public in 2007. But in 1314, even life imprisonment wasn't a harsh enough sentence as far as King Philip IV was concerned. When he heard about Desmoulins' protest, he ordered both him and his compatriot burned at the stake that very night. In addition to the Templars who were burned alive, many others would die during their years of harsh confinement. Some succumbed to torture, refusing to the end to confess sins that they had never committed.
And so it would be negative for the Knights of Templar to admit to that. It's symbolic here to me. When I saw it, I immediately thought, that's interesting. The reason I thought that was because, for one thing, I've heard about the skulls, and I was glad to see them. They weren't on the wall. They're on pieces of paper. They are in his blood, and they aren't great drawings.
Are those photos or are those actual? That's actually
those are the actual things. You can see on the you can see the top where it's waved up. It's been in a place with moisture.
Okay.
So I think most recently the Satanic Temple. I don't know what this place is called, but I remember there was a big hubbub about them putting up this statue of the Baphomet. Where was it? Arkansas, maybe.
I'll find it.
Yeah, look it up because but this has been within the past few years, so Keys wouldn't have been aware of that.
No,
You are a liar. You pose as a Christian, and you are nothing more than an agent of Satan. You are from the pit of hell.
I disagree with you.
You are leading people to hell.
It's almost like that Christian persecution doesn't exist. I mean.
Hail Satan! Hail Satan!
Let me say this, that based upon the U.S. Supreme Court decision in Pleasant Grove City versus Simoon, it will be a very cold day in hell before we are ever forced to put up a permanent monument on the state capitol grounds that's as offensive as this group that hides behind fake names as they travel the country.
And for the record, I tried to find a more complete article about what Meg was talking about related to the Baphomet, but I can't find one covering this incident in a sensical way anywhere on the internet.
Okay, so anyway, so it's a symbolic thing that's been used by pagans, the occult, and Satanists. And I found a quote which I had sent over to you, and it's just from like Wikipedia, but it says Ioannis Stamatakos, so Ioannis Stamatakos has pointed out that the name Baphomet, when interpreted through the universal transliteration of the letters with the Greek, is a basic Atbash crypt, which splits the word in the middle and places the last part to the beginning of the word, spelling the word meta. And
not to interrupt, Meg, but there's not enough beer for me to keep working on the weekend. So let me explain that an Atbash cipher is a monoalphabetic substitution cipher. It's a particular type formed by taking the alphabet and mapping it to its reverse. So the first letter becomes the last letter, the second letter becomes the second to last letter, and so on and so forth. That's what she's doing here.
And then the R added, metaphor, with the letter B inserted to add complexity. This is consistent with occultists like Aleister Crowley, whose entire corpus of works is an extended joke. I feel like the Baphomet, it means absolutely nothing to me. So, that's one thing that I should point out. And, it's nothing personal. To me, it's just somebody came up with an idea. But it is representative of different things to different people. In this particular situation, I feel like it's representing the fact that he had been interrogated and
technically under the threat of death, like the night.
Right.
But
well,
he was the one threatening death, or he wanted the death penalty. But that does equate. That is like a big
I'm
joke.
aware of that. That's why I am saying that it makes sense to me that he's kind of taunting them and saying, yeah, that whole thing was a joke. And because it was left with 11 skulls, I don't know that we know he wasn't joking the whole time.
No. He says 3 separate times less than a dozen.
Okay.
He references 3 things. First of all, he says the number of states he killed in was less than a dozen. He states that the number of victims is less than a dozen. And he states that the number of banks that he robs was less than a dozen. That's his words coming out of his mouth. He used less than a dozen 3 times.
11 is the less than a dozen number, and the Baphomet is, to some people, symbolic of, a metaphor or an extended joke. I feel like that I don't really think it's a big leap for somebody to interpret it that way. I don't think that, I'm not sure anybody else is like picking up on that. I don't know. That kind of seals the deal that it's not accurate. What he said was not accurate, and that he's like letting them know that. I don't see any other way to interpret that. Now, I don't know how he would have been familiar with that.
With the Baphomet? He references the Inquisitions in one of the interviews, but it's a passing reference. It's not anything major. But the other thing is, you and I recently reviewed some texts. One of those, we went back through and read everything that he mentioned he'd read, just because, and I don't want to distract you for long, because I want to talk about those texts for a minute, but I want to hear what you have to say. You're saying you don't know how he would be familiar with the Baphomet, but I think I know. So he said he was into Satanism and occultism when he was younger.
Right.
And he states that, he was really into knives, into doing different things with knives. So he got into ropes because that was his preferred thing. He stabbed Samantha Koenig. And then he lied about the size of the wound, because depending on what you read, the sleeping bag that she was wrapped in when he left her there was soaked through with blood, although he described a post-mortem, or I guess paramortem, whatever it would be, like as she's dying, he put the knife into her shoulders, like from behind, like to like.
Yeah, I'm aware of this.
It's unexplained. Okay, so here's the other thing about all this is H.H. Holmes is mentioned, and he talks about H.H. Holmes in a way that I think, and this is not on anyone else, it's just me. I think I've tracked the text that he read. Here's why I think that. In his lifetime, in Key's lifetime, there was a lot of stuff written about H.H. Holmes. Most of the times, including H.H. Holmes himself, they refer to the pursuing agents of H.H. Holmes as being the Secret Service. So that's pretty widely known. And like if you read it today, you can read between the lines, but there was only one that I found that I put my hands on and read.
That said the Pinkertons? That
said the Pinkertons, which is accurate for that time. And that is the document that you found for me and you read it. And actually, like us reading the H.H. Holmes stuff gave us a lot of confusion at first because I think it made you go back and forth on just this issue, which Holmes, like, to summarize what Holmes did, he confessed, then he unconfessed. And you can't really tell, like, he tried for what I would call maximum publicity, and he sort of left a lot of confusion in his wake because of it. And that conversation about maximum publicity towards the end of the interviews with this killer, he talks about maximum publicity versus minimum publicity. So I think he's letting them know. So I went a bunch of different ways with the 11 because I've known it was 11 skulls. I did not know Baphomet was there, but I do believe that Baphomet has always been a metaphor. And I do believe that this killer would have read Aleister Crowley. I have no doubt that if he was into anything occult, that there were a couple of different books in the 90s that were floating around. I think he would have got his hands on it. I think he would have read Aleister Crowley, and he would have also known that Baphomet was a metaphor.
Right, and it was a metaphor to an extended joke. I mean, that's where I went with that. I assumed that. I mean, he's even said, he did at first believe in some satanic type stuff. This doesn't necessarily have to be satanic. Like, it is a satanic symbol, but it's also, it means other things to other people. And another thing is it's part of, it's used in video games, and we know he played video games. So if that would bring like way less meaning to it, as far as I'm concerned, and I don't feel like he randomly left something he had seen in a video game, in his blood while he's dying. I don't think that's a little dramatic for something like that. No. So, I do think I think it's important. I think that, the Baphomet being part of the set. So there's 11 skulls and there's one Baphomet, and all they've ever talked about in any situation is these skulls drawn in blood on the wall. Well, they're not on the wall. I mean, I guess theirs could have been on the wall, but they're on pieces of paper. I was very dismayed to see that extra drawing there.
Yeah, it throws everything off. Like, because
of the negative connotation that it has with it, that's what I'm saying. That, to me, sort of, it puts, like, the darkness. I mean, I'm not saying that it wasn't on him before. It just makes me think, like, oh, my gosh, he is really even more messed up than we already knew he was. I don't even know if that's possible, but that's what it makes me think.
I just wanted to get your take on it, your sort of immediate take. This gets mentioned because something that I was already doing and already prepared to do and I'd already even really done a lot of work on was like all these couples killings. Because there's, believe it or not, less than a dozen. And like the crazy part about the couples killings, most of them are now, they're found. There's a couple that weren't found, but there's several of them are found. And the way that they're found typically is camping, hiking, on the side of the road, stopped behind a rest stop, things like that. there's not a lot of them that happened in his time period that weren't like real obvious. Like, and I probably looked at like 150 couple killings, but most of them were murder, suicide, jealous other person. They were like real easy to carry down. And then some of them that are unsolved, and I put that in big air quotes, and I say it that way because some of these cases have been solved 4 times. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, you know, there's a couple of them where,
Well,
and I'm
that
not
means
saying
that they haven't been solved at all.
right. And that's what I mean. I'm not saying it's him either. I'm just saying like they're in his travel lanes, they're weird, and like some random guy will die, and they'll blame it on that guy.
So why would he have left that? If that's the case, that's my problem with that. Okay, so are you saying that in addition, I mean, we know he killed Samantha Koenig, and she was just a single girl. So we know that he didn't
She's not one of them. No. I'm just saying, like, what if that was the thing? I mean, ultimately.
But why? Why would he do that?
Okay, so here was my thinking on it, and it's not necessarily super clear. I'm going to try and make it how I rationalize it so that you can understand it. What I thought was he knew a number in his head, because I honestly think like his number would be like trying to like chase down a 60-year-old single woman and ask her how many people she slept with, or an NBA basketball player and ask him how many they slept with. Like if you did that, like you'd get a number. But like, you know, Wilt Chamberlain's number was like, I don't know, more than 1,000 or whatever he said. So to me, if you ask this, I think, and I know you don't necessarily agree or disagree on this because you are looking for facts, and that's fine. I think this guy has been killing and doing a very specific thing, like with the bodies and with how he disposes of the bodies, and, you know, for this entire 16-year period. But I also, you know, I boil his semantics down and I say, I think he killed those 2 little girls in Colville, but he didn't kill them. And I say that because I think he raped them, beat them, strangled them unconscious, but he left them laying in the woods 20 miles from home or 5 miles from home or whatever, but he didn't kill them. I put that in air quotes, like he didn't finish them off. He just left them there to die. So that's the type of thing I've looked at with this killer. But what I was rationalizing was, I bet he remembers the number of couples he killed. And he's saying, I never made the 12 couples. I always wanted to make it to a dozen or some shit in his head. So when he was answering all of their questions about that, that's what he used was like.
And with the Baphomet being present, does that change your opinion?
Well, the Baphomet makes me think, now that you've explained it to me, because like I said, I had all these pieces, but I haven't read about the Knights of Templar in a while. And when you said that in text message, I was like, oh my God, because the first thing I was thinking of was like, and this sounds silly to say, but like navel kissing was confessed to, and like all these other weird things. Like if you go through and read like what they confessed to, some of it's real dark, and some of it's like just nonsense of the time, things that were illegal and looked down on, and sodomy, and you know, like whatever, like things that today nobody thinks about.
Well, I don't think any of that is really important. I think the point was
it's all an extended joke.
No, well, yeah, but I think the point of like the fact that, you know, when pressed, there were, you know, confessions that they committed a grave sin in worshiping this pagan idol type thing in some way. Like it parallels him confessing to things or talking about things when he was put in a position to be interrogated and pressured. Are you following? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It makes sense.
So I don't think really necessarily all the details are important more than just the concept, because during the Inquisition, like confessing to to worshiping a pagan idol would have meant certain death. So, like, what was the solution there? It's sort of, and, you know, that goes along with, like, the Salem witch trials when, you know, they would throw people into the lake, and if they sank, they weren't a witch, but they were dead. If they floated, they'd kill them. So, I mean, there's no real good answer there. I don't know much about the Knights of Templar. I do, just the concept of what's happening is that sort of what he's been experiencing. I think that's what he's saying. So under, when you were interrogating me and interviewing me, I gave you, I said less than a dozen, and that's 11. And, that was a joke.
And as disturbing as that may all seem, it does fit into our final theory. So we want to know, on this 48-hour special about tracking the victims of Israel Keys, do the FBI mention the Baphomet? And if so, what do they think of that? Do they think it's just 11 victims? And I've got 2 more pieces of information for you. One is from a recording, and it's about secrets and mysteries that are found in works of art. The other is about where I think the killer might have learned about Lake Crescent, at least the story itself, maybe not the recovery. So check that out, and then check out the 48 Hours TV show, and tell me what you think. Because I always believe the more you know, the less skeptical you have to be.
It's pretty cool when you find an Easter egg on a Blu-ray or hidden within a movie. But it's even more fascinating when you uncover mysterious messages buried in famous works of art. Some of the secrets on our list remained undiscovered for over half a millennia, including a hidden musical score, a mysterious object floating in the sky, and one famous composer's tribute to a clandestine worldwide organization. Here is our list of the top 7 secrets hidden in famous artworks. Number 7. The Secret of the Last Supper. Leonardo da Vinci was a man of many talents. He was an inventor, architect, scientist, sculptor, and of course an artist. But there's one more talent da Vinci is known for, which may have been hidden in one of his most famous works, The Last Supper, and that talent was music. In 2003, Giovanni Maria Palla discovered that if you draw lines of musical staff across the painting to correspond with the positions of the hands of the apostles and loaves of bread, you uncover a melody which had remained secret for over 500 years. At first, the music didn't make any sense. But after remembering that Leonardo wrote music from right to left, Giovanni reversed the score. You see, Leonardo wasn't the only one who could hide things in great art. 6. The Secret Diagram. Michelangelo's The Creation of Adam is one of the most iconic images in human history, depicting the Book of Genesis scene where God breathed life into Adam through his fingers. Obviously, because a painting of the Lord Almighty going mouth-to-mouth with Adam may have been a little risque for the walls of the Sistine Chapel. But in 1990, an American physician, Dr. Frank Meshberger, noticed something familiar about the area surrounding God. What is that weird shape that the Lord seems to be crowd surfing out from? Meshberger noticed that the border of the area behind God corresponds precisely with the side profile cross-section of the human brain. Here's the pituitary gland, the frontal lobe, the vertebral artery, the spinal cord, the pons, the sylvan fissure, and the brainstem. And if you need further evidence, then consider the fact that age 17 Michelangelo was a passionate anatomy student who dissected corpses from his local church graveyard to study. And that alone will get you on some sort of watch list. So maybe don't judge that kid in your class who likes to play with roadkill because he could be the world's next great artist. In at 5, evidence of ancient aliens. Take a look at this image of Domenico Ghirlandaio's painting, The Madonna with St. Giovannino, and see what catches your eye immediately. Is it the attractive lady in the center? Perhaps it's the baby with the low-slung slacks trying to give her a high five, while the other angel baby checks out his Jillian Michaels physique. That kid is more ripped than I'll ever be. Or maybe the first thing you noticed was the strange object hovering in the sky and the dude below it wondering what the heck it is. There are a number of paintings which depict unidentified flying objects in the sky, but Ghirlandaio's is one of the most startling due to its prominence and the reaction of the guy on the right. He's looking at a disc-shaped object which seems to be shining brightly whilst decked out in a strange array of spears. What on earth was Ghirlandaio trying to show us? Or maybe Earth isn't the proper word to use. Number 4, a message for the Pope. This is Michelangelo's The Prophet Zechariah, and it was painted in the Sistine Chapel in 1512 during the reign of Pope Julius II. Now, to say Pope Julius wasn't everybody's favorite is a bit like saying people thought the new Ghostbusters 3 trailer looked a little crappy. Julius II was known as Papa Terrible, and you can translate that for yourself. But Michelangelo wasn't a fan either, and it's believed that he painted Zechariah in a way that closely resembles Pope Julius. Now that's not particularly insulting, is it? Sounds like quite a nice gesture, actually, until you realize one of the two babies sat behind Zechariah is making a little gesture of its own. See the thumb poking out between the middle and index fingers? Well, the Pope didn't, and nor did the Vatican due to it being placed so high up in the chapel. But if they had, they would have seen a little baby making a gesture known as the fig, which is an ancient way of saying, and let me get this translation right, "F*** you." 3. Mona Lisa's secret. So we already know that Leonardo da Vinci likes to hide musical scores in his work. But what secrets could possibly remain hidden in the Mona Lisa, one of the world's most famous pictures of someone being forced to smile on picture day? Many theories have been thrown around regarding the layout of the picture, such as the idea that Mona Lisa was pregnant due to the arrangement of her hands, that she may have been a prostitute due to her lack of facial hair. And when the image was analyzed by a doctor, he noticed that Mona Lisa may have been suffering from a tumor in her right eye. A tumor Da Vinci clearly must have noticed. So did he tell her? And that's not the end of it, because there's even more to this picture than meets the eye, literally. By magnifying her right eye, you'll see the letters LV appear, probably his signature. But the left eye shows CE. So whose signature is that? On the bridge's arch, there's the number 72, and beneath the painting itself, the number 149 is hidden away. We are able to view Da Vinci's previous attempts at the painting through layer amplification technology, which is how we know about the number 149, and also how we know there's a whole other painting of a completely different woman underneath. So who is she? And what do all those letters and numbers mean? Da Vinci? Not the type of guy to put those things there for no reason. So if we don't know yet, it's probably going to take us another 500 years to figure that one out. 2. The puerile portrait of a president. This is a portrait of former President Bill Clinton which hangs in the Smithsonian Natural Portrait Gallery, and its artist Nelson Shanks has admitted that hidden within the painting is a reference to one of the most shocking moments of Clinton's presidency. See the dark shadow on the mantle of the Oval Office just over Bill Clinton's right shoulder? This shadow came from a mannequin which Shanks snuck into the Oval Office whilst painting the backdrop when Bill Clinton wasn't there. The mannequin was covered with a blue dress, similar to the one worn by Monica Lewinsky when she most famously helped the president find his lost contact lens over and over and over. And Shanks claims that this shadow is a metaphor for the stained legacy of Clinton's time in the Oval Office. Makes you wonder which other famous presidential portraits have secrets hidden within them. Does Theodore Roosevelt have a teddy bear in his pocket? Or is he just happy to see you? And at number 1, the mysterious musical maestro. This is a painting of classical composer Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart when he was just 6 years old. The painting was created by Pietro Antonio Lorenzoni in 1763, but did you know that the way Mozart is depicted hints at his membership of the world's most secretive society, the mysterious Freemasons? It is well known that Mozart became a Freemason later in life. But does this painting indicate his involvement from a much earlier age? A hand hidden within the shirt or jacket pocket is believed to be an indication of one's dedication to the Masonic cause, and whilst many of his later works do allude to his devotion to Freemasonry, it would be quite shocking if he had been indoctrinated from the age of 6. Oh wait, hang on! Hidden hand, you say? Like a disembodied pained spirit hand pointing you towards clicking on our latest Top 7 Creepiest Forest and Woods video, which you should go watch right now, right after you turn on all the lights.
From Boydski.com, The Warren Wreck.
The Warren wreck, located at about 170 feet of depth off of Ambulance Point in Lake Crescent, is an amazing dive back into history. Blanche and Russell Warren were returning home from Port Angeles on July 3, 1929, to be with their sons for the 4th of July. They never made it home, disappearing without a trace and leaving a mystery that took nearly 75 years to solve. Highway 101 was a treacherous road along the southern shore of Lake Crescent back in the day. It was long suspected that the Warrens' car had slid off the road into the lake, but numerous attempts to drag the lake, as well as exploratory dives, had failed to turn up their vehicle. The Warren boys, Charles and Frank, were only 12 and 14 when their parents disappeared. They had a hard life, teased that their parents had run off, and both died tragically without knowing what had really happened to Mom and Dad. In 2001, Bob Caso, a former diver that keeps hounding Don Pontbrun, a ranger for the Olympic National Park, to continue the search for the Warrens' 1927 Chevrolet. Evidence gathered in 1929 suggested the wreck had happened on Madrono Point, but there was no Madrono Point on any of the maps of the lake. A fortunate glance up the cliff near Meldrum Point, aka Ambulance Point, from a boat revealed an old Madrono tree hiding among the fir trees. The search began in earnest near Ambulance Point, mile marker 223, and in 2002, the Park Service dive team found the Warrens' 1927 Chevrolet in 170 feet of water, just east of the point. Human remains were discovered nearby by John Rawlings in 2004, which DNA testing later proved to be those of Russell Warren. Today, the car sits on a very steep slope, with the top of the car downhill. The bottom of the car is upslope and more than half covered with rocks, making the vehicle very hard to spot from above. However, swimming along at about 165 feet, the wreck is easily located, and the clear waters of the lake make this a very nice dive. Diving the Warren wreck requires a permit from the National Park Service, and it's just a bit too deep for recreational divers. There's a nice staging area and good parking right at Ambulance Point. Be safe and have a great dive on an interesting bit of Northwest history. More information on diving the Warren and Steele wrecks can be found in Northwest Wreck Dives.
Thanks for joining us. You can reach us at 252-365-5593 or at truecrimexcess.com or truecrimexcess@gmail.com if you want to send us a note. This episode was brought to you by LabrottieCreations.com. That's LABROTTIECREATIONS.com. Check out the merchandise and specifically their fun Pop Pet art custom pieces made from photos of your very own pets. Use the promo code CRIMEXS, that's CRIMEXS, for 20% off a fun, brightly colored, happy piece of art of your own pet at their site, LabrottieCreations.com. Music in this episode was licensed for True Crime XS. The theme song was Indestructible by Noah Smith. You can find us on your favorite podcast platform or at TeePublic, Instagram, or Twitter. You can also join us on Patreon to fund future body exploration trips. But the best thing you can do for us is leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform and share us with your friends. And don't forget, on July 3rd, we are literally revealing where the bodies are buried. See you next week.
This is True Crime XS.